Good morning, everybody. I'm Don Stewart, and welcome to another edition of Breaking News. Today is Friday, the 21st day of November, 2025. And as things continue to heat up in the Middle East, we have three important stories to share with you that basically summarize the latest developments. So here we go. First, from the Jewish News Syndicate, Netanyahu says the U.S. assured that the F-35 sale to Riyadh won't imperil their military edge. That is Israel's military edge. That's from the Jewish News Syndicate. From JFeed N12, shock in Israel. Anonymous website posts lists of Israeli academics. We'll explain a little bit about this list. And then the Jerusalem Post says this story, Trump embraces Saudis, UN backs Gaza plan, but Israel faces harsh Middle East realities from the Jerusalem Post. Now, all in all, we have this confusing story about the F-35s, a shocking story about a list, and then an important point that is made about the traditional vagueness of all Middle East agreements. In contrast to this, the Bible is not vague on what is going to eventually happen. See our 12 books on Bible prophecy from our website, Educating Our World, including our book, 25 Signs. We're near the end. They're all free downloads, as is the other 53 books we have on the website that cover 10 other biblical topics such as God, the Bible, Jesus Christ, the Holy Spirit, the afterlife, Christian living, etc. Again, all free downloads. Please take advantage of them. They will be a big help to you. All right, let's get to these stories. First headline, Netanyahu. U.S. assured that the F-35 sale to Riyadh won't imperil their military edge. It's in the Jewish News Syndicate. Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman did not get everything he wanted from President Trump, the Prime Minister said. Jerusalem has received assurances from the United States that the sale of F-35 stealth fighter jets to Saudi Arabia will not imperil its qualitative military edge. Prime Minister Netanyahu said this yesterday, Thursday night. In an interview with Abu Ali Express platform that was published last night, he said the U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, during a phone call they held on Wednesday, expressed his commitment to maintaining the Jewish state's regional military superiority. They didn't ask us before the sale of the F-35s, but once it happened, I spoke with him and made sure of it, the Prime Minister said, adding that the Crown Prince, MBS, Mohammed bin Salman, didn't get everything he wanted. The Abu Ali Express interview with Netanyahu was posted hours after a spokeswoman for his office made similar remarks to the press. Now, Netanyahu and U.S. President Donald Trump are both committed to upholding the long-standing understanding that Israel maintains a qualitative edge when it comes to its defense, Shosh Bedrosian said, speaking from the Jewish state's capital during a briefing for reporters. That had been true has been true yesterday. That has been true today. And the prime minister believes that will be true tomorrow and in the future, of course, she added, responding to a question from Reuters. Now, Thursday's comments marked Jerusalem's first official public remarks on the sale to Riyadh, which Trump first confirmed ahead of the meeting with Prince Mohammed earlier this week. Speaking alongside the prince in the Oval Office on Tuesday, Trump said Jerusalem has been made aware of the arrangement with Riyadh. Now, listen to what he said here. This is fascinating from Trump. Israel would, quote, like you to get planes of reduced caliber, speaking to MBS, like you to get planes of reduced caliber, Trump told the prince as reporters looked on. I don't think that makes you too happy. As far as I'm concerned, I think they are both at a level where they should get top of the line, Trump said of Jerusalem and Riyadh. That's what he said in front of reporters at MBS. However, Reuters cited U.S. officials and defense experts as saying on Wednesday that the F-35 jets Washington intends to sell Saudi Arabia will be less advanced than those operated by the Israeli Air Force. Israel's military has unique permission to modify the F-35 fighter jets, allowing it to integrate its own weapon systems and add radar jamming and other upgrades without requiring U.S. approval. Jerusalem has reportedly signaled its opposition to the proposed sale of 48 fighter jets to Riyadh. Outgoing Israel Strategic Affairs Minister Ron Dermer raised concerns concerning the sale at a meeting with top officials in Washington last week from Kan News, as an Israeli news site reported this. Two Israeli officials told Axios on November 15th that Jerusalem had asked the Trump administration to condition any F-35 sale on Riyadh fully normalizing diplomatic relations with the Jewish state. Trump on Tuesday would not confirm reports that Israel asked the sale be conditioned on Riyadh joining the Abraham Accords, which they have not and will not for this foreseeable future, because recall what MBS said. He said two things must happen. The war must end in Gaza. fighting must completely end. There has to be a resolution there and the movement towards a Palestinian state. None of those are going to happen, believe me. And so there's not going to be any kind of agreement between the two of them to normalize the diplomatic relations. Now, currently, and this is the important point, the IDF is the only military in the Middle East that has the F-35s. Washington previously mulled selling them to the UAE, but subject to security guarantees, but the deal fell through to the Biden administration's demand to restrict the use of the stealth fighters. All right, so anyway, it certainly they want to make sure Israel they have the operational advantage over Saudi Arabia. That's the bottom line of this. They don't want to be on par with them. And from what I understand, they get these planes and they gut them. Japan got some from us too. They gut them and put their own, avionics material in there, and the Saudis will do the same thing. But Israel has, as far as we know, it seemingly a lot of advanced technology there that they can put in their planes that these other countries cannot have. Okay. Now, the story continues, though, to be controversial and worrisome because we hear various reports. Israel must have the strategic edge militarily in the Middle East if they're to thwart Iran, Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis, Turkey, etc. This is the proverbial ticking time bomb. They always must be ahead militarily than all these countries, and the others are trying to catch up. Again, we worry that the U.S. will continue to make detrimental decisions about Trump's peace plan that will harm Israel. And if so, it would fit sign 11 of the 25 signs we're near the end, namely, no superpower will intervene on Israel's behalf when they're invaded, Ezekiel 38:39. Something will happen to the United States. And if the U.S. keeps acting this way and keeps making statements like Trump did in front of MBS in the world, well, we want to make you on par with Israel with respect to your military advantages, that is not good. All right, but we'll keep you posted on the latest. Now, this next headline, I'm not going to share everything about it with you because there's things I've got to be careful about saying here on social media. You can read about this, of course, on our app and in our summary in our YouTube presentation of this. And so we always have the summary there. For those of you new, we not only have this program, which we do the stories, but we summarize it too for you, so you could cut and paste that if you wish, and gives you, a summary of what's taken place. Anyway, shock in Israel. Anonymous website posts a list of Israeli academics. So you can imagine what type of list it is. This is from JFeed and 12. Professor Daniel Chamovitz, president of Ben-Gurion University and head of the Committee of University Presidents, himself on the list, responded, I am mainly disturbed by the extreme discourse that encourages violence. I trust Israel's security forces and those in democratic countries could handle this incident. In a strongly worded statement, the Committee of University Presidents said, we are witnessing a dangerous and horrifying escalation in which a website marks academics and permits their blood through a quote-unquote list, offering payment for certain things. They go into the list of what's that is offered for. We have that again on our summary here. The grave information has been transferred immediately for urgent handling by the Israeli police and the National Cyber Directorate with the understanding this is a tangible threat and cannot be delayed. The current reality in which wild excitement from within against researchers and faculty merges with the global wave of anti-Semitism and hatred of Israel, it creates a toxic and deadly mix that could, God forbid, end in loss of life. The writing is on the wall in letters of fire. We demand that security agencies act with an iron fist against the operators and shut down the site immediately, and at the same time call on Israel's leadership to show responsibility and stop at once the hate speech and incitement directed at Israel academia before it's too late. Now, this is an example, and it's quite an extreme example, but we see this sort of thing, like we mentioned here, every single day around the world about websites, the hate speech, the threats against Israel, not only Israelis, but Jews. Like we said, this organization that they found that they discovered, that is the Shin Bet, MI5, no, it's Shin Bet, it was Mossad, the MI5, and the CIA found in Europe, and that's Hamas has a whole network of terrorists working together there, and their whole goal is to kill Jews and Israelis, and so this list is basically has the same aim for it. Iran is believed, by the way, to be behind this list. That wouldn't be surprising if so. Israelis and Jews are singled out for destruction. And this is sign 21 of our 25 signs. We're near the end. There'll be a rise in anti-Semitism. The entire world will be against Israel. And that's exactly what we see. Now, this third headline is kind of a summary of what's going on, similar to the article we did yesterday by Jonathan Tobin from the Jewish News Syndicate, that basically kind of summarizes what's happening and why it's detrimental to Israel right now, why things aren't happening the way they wanted to. But the difference is this article brings up something that I think we've mentioned briefly in the past, but it really needs to be emphasized. We'll get to it in a minute to explain to you why there's so much confusion with respect to all these peace plans and all these things that the UN does, etc. All right, here it goes. Headline number three. Trump embraces the Saudis' UN backs Gaza plan, but Israel faces harsh Middle East reality. This is from the Jerusalem Post. A UN resolution and a Saudi spectacle hinted at movement in the region, but the Middle East has a way of bringing even the boldest plans back down to earth. Ain't that the truth? This was a week of dramatic Middle East headlines. First, the UN Security Council approved on Monday what was billed as a transformative Gaza resolution, UNSC, United Nations Security Council 2803, laying out a new international architecture for Gaza's future. Then on Tuesday, U.S. President Donald Trump rolled out a royal red carpet reception in Washington for Saudi Crown Prince MBS, complete with promises of F-35s, nuclear cooperation, and an unmistakable message that Riyadh is once again central to Washington's regional strategy. MBS, for his part, expressed interest in joining the Abraham Accords if, and this is a humongous if Israel shows a clear path to a Palestinian state. Of course, they won't. All of these were significant announcements, but in this part of the world, and here's really the key, big announcements are the easy part. Implementation is where grand visions usually go to die. The headline shouted a Middle East being remade. The fine print whispered something far more familiar, namely, proceed with caution. Okay, here's what's going on. Gaza's International Stabilization Force, rich in aspiration, thin on detail. Which brings us first to New York, where the Security Council voted overwhelmingly to authorize an international stabilization force for Gaza and endorse Trump's 20-point Gaza ceasefire plan. For the first time since October 7th, the major powers agreed not just on a Gaza ceasefire, but on a framework for what comes next. On paper, the plan promises border security, civilian protection, organized humanitarian aid delivery, training of Palestinian police, and essential for Israel, the dismantling of Hamas's military capabilities under international oversight. Prime Minister Netanyahu welcomed the resolution, though notably only in English, a choice that speaks to the fault lines inside his coalition. Netanyahu's emphasis remained conveniently on demilitarization, disarmament, and the de radicalization of Gaza, and on the close partnership with Washington. A statement in Hebrew would have ignited fierce internal pushback, particularly over this line in the resolution after the PA, Palestinian Authority reform program is faithfully carried out and Gaza redevelopment has advanced, the conditions may finally be in place for a credible pathway to Palestinian self-determination and statehood. Close quote. That was what's in the resolution. Like so many ambitious UN documents before it, this one is rich in aspiration, but thin on detail. Its transitional authorities run for years, but the sequencing is vague. It imagines a Palestinian authority suddenly transparent, efficient, and capable of governing, a scenario that today exists only in the realm of fantasy, as we've been saying. And crucially, it offers no clear mechanism to compel Hamas's disarmament, even as Hamas loudly rejects the entire framework. Now, what's next here is what's crucial to understand. This may be new for a lot of you. The article puts it very clearly. This vagueness is not new. Resolution 2803 belongs to a long line of Middle East resolutions constructed around ambiguity, deliberately so in many cases to win broad assent from parties who fundamentally disagree. And I'm going to give some examples. This was the case with Resolution 242, whose famously ambiguous phrasing on territories versus the territories enabled everyone to sign on to it in 1967 while meaning very different things to different parties. It was true of 1973's Resolution 338, which called for a ceasefire and for the implementation of 242 in all of its parts, while never clarifying what was actually required. The ambiguity was a feature, not a bug, enough precision to pass, enough vagueness to avoid confrontation. Resolution 2803, that's this new one, follows the tradition faithfully. It leaves critical terms undefined, what demilitarization means, who certifies it, how the PA meets its own reform conditions, and when Israel's security perimeter will no longer be necessary. Because of the ambiguity, everyone can see in it what they want to see. But it is exactly this type of ambiguity that has doomed earlier resolutions to decades of dispute, reinterpretation, and eventual irrelevance. All right, this last point is so important for all of us to understand. Historically, many of the agreements made in the Middle East have been purposely vague on specifics. This, of course, adds to the confusion of what these agreements truly mean. And the Trump plan is another example in a long line of this vagueness. This is why we see conflicting conclusions from the various groups involved: Israel, Hamas, the Palestinian Authority, the Arab states, Turkey, Qatar, etc. While knowing that this vagueness helps us understand the confusion and conflicting statements from these various groups, it certainly doesn't help us determine how all of this will eventually resolve itself. For this, at least in the short term, we must wait and see. And as we always say, in the long term, we know what's going to happen because the Bible tells us. But in the short term, literally nobody knows. But we'll keep you posted. All right. Thank you again for watching. I'm Don Stewart. We'll be back later for another edition of Breaking News. Until then, as always, may the Lord richly, richly bless you.